My new video is a guide on how I recommend to play the Jagdpanther G1. It is a strong tank destroyer that has a favorable BR for realistic battles. Beside the advantages of this vehicle, it still has some flaws you need to consider while playing. Before we jump into my tips, let's have a look at the advantages and disadvantages of the Jagdpanther G1 to get a better understanding on how you can use it effectively. Welcome to my new video. The Jagdpanther G1 is a German tank destroyer at the BR 6.0 for realistic battles that comes with a strong gun. The APCBC shell has up to 237mm of penetration value and a good velocity. The explosive feeling helps to get a lot of one-shots. You can use the same shell as you use for the Tiger 2H that has a 0.7 higher battle rating than the Jagdpanther. So the gun is a huge advantage for this vehicle, and the reload time of 9.8 seconds in average is totally fine. In addition, you get a good magnification and gun depression with -8 degrees. On paper, the armor might not be the best with 80mm for the upper front plate, but it has a slope angle. I would not recommend to count on the lower front plate because it is not that well armored. Since the transmission is right behind it, you will be stuck in place after a hit. The angle of the upper front plate helps against the 76mm or 85mm guns of the American or Russian tanks. However, there are stronger enemies around that BR, and even in full down tiers you have to play carefully when you encounter, for example, an IS-2, AM-51 or even a Walker Bulldog. The advantage comes with the angle and a good gun depression. Go hull down and maximize the angle of the front of your tank even more. You can use the gun depression to shoot on enemies while you increase the chance of bouncing hostile shells. The side and rear armor is bad and you want to protect it all of the time. Since the Jagdpanther is a casemate tank, you have no turret that you can turn towards the enemy. But the Jagdpanther can turn really fast, and this gives you two advantages. You can react fast on enemies that try to flank you, and you can wiggle the tank while you are reloading to maximize your armor, and give the enemy a hard time to aim at you. Just make sure not to expose too much of your side armor, and use this tip only when necessary. You can't always rely on this trick. The forward mobility is good, and up to 46 km/h can help you to get fast to some favorable positions or to relocate. But now it is time to talk about the disadvantages and the biggest flaw of this tank. It is the reverse speed. Like for the Panthers, you only have -4 km/h, and this is too slow to peak and boom or to get you out of a dangerous situation. As mentioned earlier, the Jagdpanther G1 is a casemate tank and you have no turret. This can also be seen as a disadvantage, especially in combination with the bad reverse speed. The bouncy suspensions is another disadvantage, and your gun will wiggle a lot before you get your aim on the target. Now that we know all of the advantages and disadvantages, we can talk about my tips on how I recommend to play this vehicle. Tip number 1. Play it like a casemate tank. A casemate tank is a vehicle without a turret that can be turned. Most of the time casemate tanks are tank destroyers that have a heavier, more powerful gun end or a better armor protection. When you can't get the aim on the target within the limited gun traverse range, you have to turn the whole vehicle to aim. This results in a special playstyle. Staying put in the back of the map may be a possible way to play a casemate tank, and on some maps you can use this. You just want to make sure that you have an impact on the match. This is why I like to start from the second row with the Jagdpanther. You don't necessarily need to stick with teammates in this vehicle because you have a good reload speed and you can turn the hull fast. This helps to deal with flankers and other enemies that pop up. However, since the upper front plate is the strongest part of your armor, you want to find a position in the second or third row, where you can go hull down to maximize your armor, where you have protection to both of your sides and where you can oversee a capture point or a street where the enemy will appear. Starting from the second or third row not only narrows the angle of possible attacks, but also the likelihood of getting flanked early in the match. When it is later in the match, I follow my teammates to keep up a proper front line, but I still support at least from the second row, and try to find a spot where my side armor is still protected. When I move from key position to key position with the Jagdpanther, I use solid cover to cross a line of fire where I can't point my front armor at the enemy, even if this means I have to make a detour or back up. The Jagdpanther has a good forward mobility, but you want to relocate carefully. It is not that easy to back up out of a dangerous situation. Keep in mind that some maps like narrow towns are not the best map for a casemate tank, and maybe another tank suits better to help your team. Tip number 2. Pick your fights. In down tiers you will encounter enemies that you can push more aggressively while playing from the second row. They won't have the guns to penetrate your upper front plate, but be aware that they can still damage your gun or tracks, and with the bad reverse speed you can't back up easily. Wiggle your tank to give the enemy a hard time aiming at you while you are reloading, and pick your fights. As mentioned, the 76mm guns of the American tanks and the 85mm guns of the Russian tanks are not much of a threat, but for example the IS-2, the M51, the Walker Bulldog or the British tanks can penetrate the upper front plate. In down tiers you can also show more of your tank and stay in the open for longer, given that you keep some distance to the enemy. Starting from the second or third row makes it harder for the enemy to hit you, while you have a strong gun with a high velocity and good magnification for its BR. However, still be careful, pick your fights and don't show your lower front plate. Tip number 3, play as support. In full up tiers or close to it the enemies get stronger, and I like to start from the third row and stick with stronger teammates. Like mentioned earlier, the Jagdpanther has a strong gun for 6.0 and it is needed on the battlefield. On some maps you can also use the support routes. With the good turn rate and the fast reload you can also fight flankers. Try to stay held down and use the gun depression to maximize the armor of the front plate. Use binoculars to check if it is safe to leave cover and take the bad suspensions into account. You will need some time to get the aim on the weak spot. Also be aware that you can't back up again fast. Hopefully your teammates can keep the enemy busy in the meantime. Here are some additional tips. Bring a few high explosive shells for squishy vehicles and use smoke grenades to cover your retreat. The gun of the Jagdpanther is really bouncy, especially when you come to a stop after going full speed. Normally you would wait until the gun is fully aligned with the aiming circle, but you can train yourself to shoot before that has happened. Focus on the crosshair, not the aiming circle, and shoot when it is on the target. To sum it up, don't rush into battles and rather start and support from the second or third row. In down tiers you can play a bit more aggressively, but you still want to pick your fights. Use positions where you can go hull down and still have an impact on the match. Keep in mind that maybe some maps just don't suit the playstyle of a casemate tank. I hope I was able to give you some tips on how to play the Jagdpanther. Like, subscribe and leave a comment if you want to, and check out my Discord server for more information and to connect with other players. Hope to see you in game soon.